creation of a space marine stands as one of the Imperium's most sacred and terrible processes. These warrior gods, the Adeptus Astartes, represent humanity's finest defenders against the galaxy's countless horrors. But the path to becoming one of the Emperor's chosen angels demands more than courage or skill. It requires a biological transformation so profound, so agonizing, that most who attempt it die screaming. Those who survive but fail to complete the metamorphosis face fates that mock the very concept of mercy. They become servitors with just enough consciousness remaining to remember what they might have been. They become chapter serfs, watching their successful brothers ascend to glory while they remain trapped in bodies that began the transformation but could never finish it. They become weapons pointed at enemies of the Imperium, expendable assets whose value lies solely in how they die. The Imperium does not waste resources. Every aspirant who enters a chapter's fortress monastery has sworn themselves utterly to the service of the Emperor. This oath transcends life, transcends sanity, transcends even the concept of individual will. When a boy volunteers to become a space marine, he ceases to exist as a person with rights or choices. He becomes raw material for the chapter's use, flesh and bone to be moulded into whatever form serves the Emperor's will. If that form is a transhuman warrior, blessed indeed. If that form is a lobotomized servitor grafted to a gun turret, then so be it. Only in death does duty end, and the chapters ensure that even death serves their purposes. The selection process itself eliminates the vast majority of candidates before they ever reach the gene seed implantation stage. Chapters recruit from the most violent and harsh environments humanity has produced. Hive world gangers who have survived years of brutal warfare, feral worlders who hunt predators with nothing but primitive weapons, feudal world nobles trained in combat from childhood. These are not ordinary children. They represent the absolute peak of unaugmented human potential, young men who have already killed to survive, who have demonstrated inhuman pain tolerance, who possess the kind of fanatical devotion that allows them to charge into certain death without hesitation. Yet even these exceptional specimens die in droves during the initial trials. The Blood Angels force their aspirants to cross the radiation-soaked deserts of Baal Secundus, where the temperature fluctuates between extremes that would kill an ordinary human in hours. Fire scorpions the size of wolves hunt in packs through canyons filled with poisonous gases. The water sources carry toxins that induce horrific hallucinations and painful mutations. Of the thousands who begin the journey, only 50 reach the place of challenge. The rest die of exposure, predation, poisoning, or simple exhaustion. Their bodies return to the desert, becoming food for the same ecosystem that killed them. The Dark Angels conduct their trials on worlds scattered across the Imperium, visiting each once per generation to claim the strongest youths. Their representatives pit candidates against each other in contests of strength, agility, and endurance that frequently prove fatal. A boy might climb a cliff face for hours only to have his fingers fail on the final handhold, plummeting to his death while his rivals continue upward. He might fight hand-to-hand combat with other aspirants using real weapons, learning that victory sometimes requires killing those who were your brothers just hours before. The Dark Angels watch these trials with cold assessment, noting which candidates possess not just physical prowess, but the psychological capacity for the chapter's particular brand of paranoid secrecy. The Space Wolves conduct trials that appear deceptively simple. Their wolf priests descend upon Fenris during the darkest winter months, seeking warriors who have already proven themselves in tribal warfare. The selected candidates must then survive being transported to the Fang, the Space Wolves' fortress monastery, while undergoing exposure to their chapter's unique genetic modifications. Many die during the journey itself, their bodies unable to accommodate even the preliminary changes. Those who survive face the blooding, a ritual that involves drinking a genetic cocktail that induces violent mutations. The weak die screaming as their bodies tear themselves apart from within. The strong emerge changed, marked by the Canis helix that separates them from other chapters' recruits. But surviving the initial trials merely grants an aspirant the right to truly begin dying. The gene seed implantation process consists of 19 separate organ transplants, each one a surgical horror that must be performed while the subject remains conscious. Pain suppressants cannot be used for many of these procedures. The implanted organs require the aspirant's brain to remain active, forming neural connections that allow the new biological systems to integrate with the human body's existing structures. an aspirant must be awake, must feel every cut, every insertion, every moment as foreign tissue grafts itself to his organs and bones. The first implant, the secondary heart, seems almost merciful in its simplicity. Surgeons place a second, smaller heart in the chest cavity, connecting it to the circulatory and pulmonary systems. The procedure takes hours. The aspirant feels the pressure as foreign tissue presses against his lungs, feels the strange sensation of 2 heartbeats falling into rhythm, feels the additional blood flow as the new organ begins its work. Many suffer cardiac arrest during the integration period, as their original heart struggles to accommodate the changes. The apothecaries restart stopped hearts with shocking regularity, bringing aspirants back from the edge of death only to continue the transformation. The osmodula follows, a tiny organ implanted in the lower torso that secretes hormones to strengthen and lengthen bones. Over the following months, an aspirant's skeleton begins to grow, adding mass and density far beyond human norms. The process induces constant grinding pain as bones literally expand and solidify. Sleep becomes nearly impossible. The aspirant's body requires vast amounts of protein to fuel the bone growth, leading to a ravenous hunger that can never be fully satisfied. Stress fractures occur regularly as the skeleton transforms faster than surrounding tissue can adapt. Some aspirants suffer catastrophic bone failures, their femurs or vertebrae shattering under the strain of too rapid growth. The biscopea amplifies muscle development, releasing hormones that trigger massive increases in muscle mass. Combined with the osmodula's bone strengthening, this organ begins transforming the aspirant's body into something beyond human proportions. A 14-year-old boy might gain 100 pounds of muscle in 6 months. His strength increases to superhuman levels even at this early stage, but the rapid growth brings agony. Muscles tear and repair themselves constantly, leaving the aspirant in a state of perpetual inflammation. His tendons struggle to anchor the expanded muscle masses to bone, sometimes ripping free during routine movements. He must undergo constant physical conditioning to prevent his own strength from crippling him. The hemastamen modifies the blood itself, enhancing its oxygen-carrying capacity and introducing rapid clotting factors. For weeks after implantation, the aspirant's circulatory system rebels against the changes. Fevers spike to levels that would kill a normal human. Blood pressure fluctuates wildly. Clotting can occur too rapidly, blocking vessels and causing strokes or heart attacks. Some aspirants simply hemorrhage to death as their blood loses the ability to clot at all, bleeding out from minor wounds as their modified hemoglobin fails to stabilize. The Larraman's organ introduces an entirely new element to the bloodstream. This golf ball-sized implant generates specialized cells that rush to seal wounds, forming an instant scar tissue that stops even arterial bleeding in seconds. The organ's integration period brings its own horrors. The Larraman cells sometimes activate spontaneously, forming masses of scar tissue inside blood vessels or within organs. Aspirants have been known to develop internal scarring so severe that it restricts organ function, choking their kidneys or liver with masses of useless tissue. The apothecaries must carefully monitor each aspirant, sometimes performing emergency surgery to remove scarring that threatens vital functions. These are merely the first 5 implants. 14 more await, each one more complex than the last, each one pushing the aspirant's body closer to the edge of biological tolerance. The multi-lung expands the chest cavity, adding a third lung equipped with filters that allow breathing in toxic atmospheres. The oculobe replaces portions of the eye, granting enhanced vision and the ability to adjust instantly to light changes. The Lyman's ear rebuilds the inner ear, providing perfect balance and superhuman hearing. The Sussen membrane allows the aspirant to enter suspended animation when critically wounded or starving. The implantation process takes years. Between each surgery, the aspirant must recover, must train, must prove that his body has accepted the previous implant before receiving the next. During this time, he serves as a scout marine for Codex-compliant chapters, learning combat skills while his transformation continues. He is not yet a full space marine. He exists in a liminal state between human and transhuman, his body a patchwork of natural and enhanced systems struggling to achieve equilibrium. Many fail during this extended period. An implant that seemed to take successfully might suddenly reject weeks or months later. The aspirant's immune system might finally recognize the foreign tissue and mount a catastrophic response. A minor injury might trigger cascading organ failures as the still integrating systems prove unable to handle the additional stress. Kale survived the desert. He survived the sarcophagus, that year-long entombment in darkness where the blood angels feed their aspirants a mixture derived from Sanguinius's own blood. He emerged changed, his skin pale as death, his canines slightly elongated, his body beginning the transformation into something more than human. The apothecaries declared him genetically compatible. The first implants followed. His body accepted the secondary heart, the os modula, the biscopia. He grew taller, stronger, his frame expanding as new bone and muscle mass accumulated. He trained with weapons, learned the catechisms, proved himself worthy in simulated combat. The chapter watched him and judged him suitable to continue. But the hemastomen failed. His blood, already modified by the ensanguination ritual, rejected the implant's influence. His circulatory system began breaking down, his blood pressure spiking to dangerous levels, his kidneys struggling to filter the increasingly toxic fluid. The apothecaries tried to stabilize him. They performed emergency surgeries, attempting to adjust the implant to modify its function. For 3 weeks, Kyle lay in the apothecarian, his body racked by fever, his blood alternately clotting in his veins or hemorrhaging from every orifice. Other aspirants came to the apothecarian, received their own surgeries, and left. Kyle remained, trapped in a body that was trying to kill him. On the 24th day, the sanguinary priests made their decision. Kale would not recover. The transformation had progressed too far to reverse but could not continue forward. His gene seed compatibility had proven false, a cruel joke played by biology on a boy who had endured so much to reach this point. He could never become a full space marine. He could never don the sacred armor, could never serve as one of Sanguinius's chosen sons. He had failed not through any weakness of will or courage, but through simple biological incompatibility. His body, despite passing every screening, despite surviving every trial, could not complete the metamorphosis. In the Imperium of Man, biological failure does not grant exemption from service. Kyle had sworn an oath. His life belonged to the Blood Angels to be used as they saw fit. The chapter had invested time, resources, and precious gene seed in his transformation. That investment would not be wasted. The sanguinary priests gathered around his bed and explained his fate with the same clinical detachment they used when harvesting gene seed from fallen brothers. He would serve, just not as he had dreamed. The chapters employ multiple methods for extracting value from failed aspirants. The most merciful option, if such a word has meaning in this context, involves assignment as a chapter serf. These servants maintain the fortress monasteries, crew the chapter's vessels, serve as human interface between the transhuman Astartes and the mortal populations they protect. For a failed aspirant who retains most of his faculties, who failed early enough in the process that his body remains mostly human, this fate allows a form of dignity. He lives and works alongside the brothers he might have been, forever reminded of his failure but at least still possessing his humanity, his ability to think and choose and feel. But Kale had progressed too far. His body had undergone significant changes. His secondary heart beat alongside his original. His bones had already begun expanding, leaving him trapped between human and Astartes proportions. The additional muscle mass granted him strength beyond mortal limits, but not enough to make him useful as a warrior. The red thirst, that curse of Sanguinius's bloodline, had already begun manifesting. He felt the hunger, the terrible need for blood that defines every blood angel. Yet without the complete transformation, without the additional implants that would have given him control over this urge, the red thirst promised only madness. The sanguinary priests made their judgment. Kale would be converted into an aspirant servitor. This fate, common among several chapters including the Blood Angels, Ultramarines, Space Wolves, and Raven Guard, represents a middle ground between mercy and utility. The process involves partial lobotomy, removing enough of the frontal cortex to eliminate higher reasoning and emotional response, while preserving motor function and basic cognition. Mechanical augmetics replace damaged organs or enhance physical capabilities. The resulting construct possesses superhuman strength without the consciousness to question orders or feel pain. The conversion began with surgery. Kyle remained conscious as the tech marines prepared him, strapping his transformed body to a surgical table. The apothecaries explained each step of the process with the same instructional tone they used when teaching aspirants anatomy. They would remove portions of his brain, They would install control interfaces directly into his cortex. They would augment his partially transformed body with mechanical components, turning him into something useful. He would serve the chapter for the remainder of his biological lifespan, however long that might be, performing labour too dangerous or degrading for fully human serfs, but not requiring the skills of a full estates. Cale tried to speak, to beg, to protest, but his oath had been absolute. Only in death does duty end. He was not permitted to die. He could only serve in whatever form the chapter deemed appropriate. The last thing he remembered with full clarity was the high-pitched whine of the surgical saw cutting through his skull. Then came darkness, and after the darkness, something that might have been awareness but could no longer be called consciousness. Cale ceased to exist as an individual. What remained wore his face and moved with his strength, but the person who had crossed Baal Secundus's deadly wastes, who had dreamed of becoming one of Sanguinius's angels, died on that surgical table. The thing that had been Cale now performs menial tasks throughout the Blood Angels Fortress Monastery. It loads ammunition into weapons. It carries equipment too heavy for human serfs. It stands guard in locations where a servitor's unthinking obedience proves more reliable than human judgment. When the chapter goes to war, aspirant servitors accompany them, serving as expendable labour in combat zones. They feel no fear when enemy fire tears into their augmented bodies. They express no pain when they lose limbs to enemy weapons. They simply continue functioning until catastrophic damage shuts down their basic motor responses. Sometimes in the deep vaults of the fortress monastery, a sanguinary priest walking past an aspirant servitor will pause. He will study the construct's face, searching for some fragment of the person who once inhabited that flesh. He will access the chapter's records, reviewing the aspirant's trial results, his performance during training, the specific biological failure that prevented his ascension. He will note how close the boy came to achieving his dream. Then he will move on, returning to his duties. The chapter has no room for sentiment. The aspirant servitor continues its tasks, unaware that it had once been human, that it had once possessed hopes and dreams and a name. This represents only one fate awaiting failed aspirants. Other chapters employ different methods, each one a variation on the theme of extracting maximum utility from biological resources that proved insufficient for their intended purpose. The specific outcome depends on when an aspirant fails, how far his transformation progressed, and what capabilities his partially modified body retains. A boy who dies during the initial trials faces the cleanest fate, his corpse returned to his homeworld or cremated with honours. An aspirant who survives most implants before failing faces the cruelest fate, trapped in a body that began the metamorphosis but can never complete it, serving the brothers he might have been as a constant reminder of what biological failure means in the Imperium of Man. The galaxy knows Space Marines as humanity's greatest warriors, as heroes beyond compare, as the Emperor's chosen defenders. Few understand the mountain of broken bodies upon which each chapter builds its strength. Few know that for every successful Space Marine, dozens or hundreds of aspirants died or were reduced to something less than human. The Adeptus Astartes stand as monuments to human potential and human waste in equal measure, their glory purchased with the suffering of those deemed unworthy. And still the aspirants come, knowing the odds, knowing what failure means, driven by desperation or devotion to volunteer for a process that will either remake them as gods or destroy everything they are. The treatment of failed aspirants varies dramatically across the 1,000 chapters of the Adeptus Astartes. Each chapter interprets its duty to failed candidates through the lens of its own culture, its genetic lineage, and its strategic needs. Some chapters demonstrate surprising compassion toward those who could not complete the transformation. Others display the ruthless pragmatism that defines the Imperium's approach to human resources. All operate within the same fundamental principle that an oath sworn to a chapter transcends death, sanity, or individual will. The Space Wolves of Fenris employ a unique method of aspirant transformation that produces particularly horrific failures. Their gene seed contains the Canis helix, a genetic modification that incorporates lupine DNA directly into the human genome. This modification grants Space Wolves enhanced senses far beyond those of other chapters, elongated fangs capable of tearing through plasteel, leathery skin resistant to extreme temperatures, and a feral ferocity in battle that makes them terrifying close combat specialists. but the Canis Helix carries a curse that shadows every son of Rus throughout his existence. The transformation begins when an aspirant drinks from the cup of Wulfen during the test of Morkai. The genetic cocktail induces immediate and violent changes. Bones split and buckle as they reshape into configurations that accommodate both human and lupine characteristics. Thick hair erupts across the body. The aspirant's consciousness retreats before an overwhelming tide of bestial instincts, leaving him hungry for raw meat and blood, driven by predatory urges that obliterate everything that made him human. This transformation occurs to every aspirant without exception. The test measures not whether the aspirant can avoid the change, but whether he can maintain enough control to make his way back to the Fang through Fenris's deadly wilderness. Those who fail the test of Morkai become Wulfen, neither human nor space wolf, but something trapped between. They remain in the wilderness permanently, hunting with pack instincts, feeding on whatever prey they can bring down. Their consciousness, if it persists at all, exists beneath layers of animal rage and hunger. They retain just enough memory of their former humanity to recognize other aspirants when they encounter them during the test of Morkai. Some Wulfen hunt these aspirants as prey, others seem to test them, forcing the candidates to prove their worthiness through combat. The Space Wolves claim this serves a purpose, that those who cannot overcome a Wulfen have no place among the sons of Rus. But the transformation into Wulfen represents only the first risk point. Even aspirants who successfully complete the test of Morkai and receive the remaining gene seed implants never escape the curse of the Wulfen entirely. The Canis Helix remains active throughout a Space Wolf's life, constantly threatening to overwhelm his human consciousness. In moments of extreme stress or combat fury, fully initiated Space Wolves can succumb to the curse decades or even centuries after their transformation. Their bodies twist into lupin forms, their minds disappear beneath tides of bestial rage. They become Wulfen despite having served honourably for generations. The wolf priests maintain constant vigilance over their brothers, watching for signs of the curse's manifestation. When a space wolf begins showing symptoms, the priests attempt intervention, using rituals and chemical treatments to stabilize the failing gene seed. Sometimes these efforts succeed, pulling the warrior back from the edge of complete transformation. More often, they merely delay the inevitable. The affected space wolf receives assignment to increasingly dangerous missions, his brothers hoping he will find an honourable death in battle before the curse claims him completely. If he transforms fully into a Wulfen, the chapter faces a difficult decision about how to handle a warrior who served faithfully for centuries before his biology betrayed him. The Space Wolves' single attempt to create a successor chapter demonstrated the horrific consequences of the Canis Helix's instability. The Wolf brothers, formed during the second founding after the Horus Heresy, quickly succumbed to the curse of the Wulfen in catastrophic numbers. Without the stabilizing influence of Fenris's unique environment, and without direct access to Leman Russ's genetic material, the chapter's gene seed degraded rapidly. Warriors transformed into Wulfen without warning during routine activities. Others developed even more terrible mutations, their bodies twisting into forms that retained neither humanity nor recognizable lupin characteristics. The Inquisition forcibly disbanded the chapter, destroying its gene seed stocks and offering its surviving members the choice between death or service as individual operatives scattered across the Imperium. Some Wolf brothers chose a third option, fleeing into the Eye of Terror, where they eventually pledged themselves to the Thousand Sons, the ancient enemies of their parent chapter. The Blood Angels and their successor. Chapters face different horrors stemming from genetic flaws that manifest psychological rather than physical transformations. The Red Thirst and the Black Rage curse every son of Sanguinius, twin afflictions that guarantee eventual madness for many who bear the Ninth Legion's gene seed. These flaws begin affecting aspirants during the transformation process itself, long before they complete their ascension to full Astarte status. The Blood Angel's transformation ritual, called Insanguination, requires aspirants to spend a full year entombed in sarcophagi within the Hall of the Sarcophagi. During this time, they receive injections of blood derived from Sanguinius himself, preserved through the Red Grail, and hosted within the bodies of sanguinary priests. The aspirant falls into a coma-like state while his body undergoes the most profound changes. His consciousness drifts through fever dreams and visions, experiencing fragments of Sanguinius's own memories, feeling echoes of the Primarch's death at Horus's hands during the Siege of Terror. For most aspirants, these visions remain manageable, troubling dreams that fade as they approach full consciousness. For others, the visions become overwhelming reality. Many aspirants die in the sarcophagi. Their bodies simply cannot withstand the year-long transformation, their organs failing as the gene seed attempts to reshape them beyond their biological tolerance. These represent the fortunate ones, dying peacefully in darkness without experiencing the true horror of the Blood Angel's curse. Others wake too early, tearing themselves from the sarcophagi's life support systems before their transformation completes. They emerge into the darkness of the hall, their minds shattered by claustrophobic terror and isolation, their bodies incomplete and failing. The blood servitors that maintain the sarcophagi must restrain these premature awakenings, dragging them back to medical facilities where sanguinary priests attempt to salvage what they can. Some aspirants emerge from the sarcophagi already gripped by the red thirst or the black rage. They remember the year of entombment as Sanguinius's final moments repeated endlessly. They experience the Primarch's battle with Horus, feel the Warmaster's claws tearing through their flesh, taste their own blood as it pours from mortal wounds. These memories belong to Sanguinius, not to the aspirant, but the gene seed carries them like a psychic infection. An aspirant who emerges already consumed by these visions cannot serve as a regular battle brother. His consciousness has been overwritten by trauma that occurred 10,000 years ago to someone else entirely. The red thirst manifests as an overwhelming hunger for blood. Those afflicted experience a craving that transcends normal appetite, a biological imperative that demands they consume the blood of their enemies. In its early stages, the red thirst remains manageable. A blood angel feels the urge but retains enough control to resist or channel it appropriately in battle. As the condition progresses, control erodes. The affected warrior begins abandoning tactical positions to engage in close combat where he can satisfy the hunger. His behavior becomes increasingly erratic. Eventually, the red thirst consumes his entire personality, reducing him to a blood-maddened beast that attacks anything living to satisfy an unquenchable need. The black rage proves even more devastating. When it manifests, the affected warrior's consciousness disappears entirely, replaced by Sanguinius's dying memories. He believes he is the Primarch himself, fighting the final battle aboard the vengeful spirit during the Siege of Terra. He sees his battle brothers as Horus's traitor legions. He fights with supernatural fury, possessed by echoes of Sanguinius's own power at the moment of death. The condition is incurable and permanent. Once a Space Marine falls to the Black Rage, he will never recover his own identity. He will fight and kill until he dies, trapped in the eternal recursive loop of the Primarch's last moments. The Blood Angels have developed specific protocols for handling brothers who succumb to these curses. Those gripped by the Red Thirst or Black Rage receive assignment to the Death Company, a unit composed entirely of the afflicted. Their armour is painted black and daubed with red crosses representing Sanguinius's wounds. Death Company chaplains, priests who have learned to communicate with the rage-consumed warriors, lead them into the most dangerous assaults imaginable. The Death Company fights without self-preservation, their members seeking only to kill and die in glorious combat. They charge into situations that would annihilate regular units, accepting casualties that would break any other force's morale. Most Death Company warriors survive only a single battle before enemy fire brings them the peace of death. For aspirants who succumb to these curses before completing their transformation, the fate proves even grimmer. They possess neither the full capabilities of a Space Marine nor the control of an unmodified human. An aspirant gripped by the Red Thirst during transformation becomes a vampire trapped in a partially augmented body, driven by hunger but lacking the strength and resilience that would make him useful in combat. The Blood Angels cannot deploy him effectively, they cannot restore his sanity. They can only lock him in the Tower of the Lost, a sealed facility atop the Tower of Amareo, where failed aspirants and fallen brothers spend their remaining days howling for blood they will never receive. The conditions inside the Tower of the Lost remain one of the Blood Angels' most closely guarded secrets. Rumours speak of chambers where the walls have been clawed into deep grooves by fingers enhanced with partially grown bone blades, of corridors echoing with screams in voices that sound almost human, of feeding schedules where carefully measured amounts of blood are provided to keep the imprisoned failures alive indefinitely. The Blood Angels maintain these failures not out of cruelty but because their oaths demand it. These aspirants swore to serve. They maintain that service, albeit in a form that provides only suffering. Only in death does duty end, and the Blood Angels do not grant that release easily. The more merciful fate for failed aspirants involves service as chapter serfs. These servants maintain the fortress monasteries, crew the chapter's vessels, perform the countless tasks necessary to keep a chapter functioning. Many chapters treat their serfs well, recognizing that these individuals demonstrated exceptional qualities even if they could not complete the transformation. The salamanders develop genuine bonds of friendship between Astartes and their serfs. The Space Wolves allow serfs to live and raise families within the Fang, creating hereditary lineages of service. The Ultramarines train their serfs to standards exceeding most Imperial Guard regiments, providing them with sophisticated equipment and education far beyond what ordinary Imperial citizens could access. For failed aspirants who retain most of their humanity, who failed early in the process before receiving any implants or who survived the rejection of a single organ, service as a chapter serf allows a form of dignity. They live and work alongside the brothers they might have been, contributing meaningfully to the chapter's mission. A serf might serve as an artificer, maintaining weapons and armor. He might crew gun turrets aboard battle barges, manning defensive positions while the Astartes focus on boarding actions. He might serve as a helot, relaying tactical information from command vehicles to warriors in the field. These positions carry honor despite their mundane nature. The serfs understand that Space Marines depend on their support, that without their labor the chapter could not function. But for failed aspirants who progressed farther into the transformation before failing, who received multiple implants before their bodies rejected the process, service as a chapter serf becomes a daily reminder of everything they lost. An aspirant who received the secondary heart and os modula before rejection lives in a body that began changing but never finished. His bones grew denser and longer, leaving him taller than normal humans but shorter than Astartes. His secondary heart beats alongside his original, providing enhanced endurance, but not the superhuman stamina of a full Space Marine. He possesses strength beyond mortal limits, but cannot match even the weakest of his battle brothers. These partial transformations create psychological torment. The failed aspirant serves alongside warriors who succeeded where he failed. He watches his former competitors don sacred armor while he remains in serf's garments. He stands guard at fortress gates while his brothers deploy to war across the galaxy. He cleans weapons he will never be permitted to carry in true battle. Every day reinforces his failure. Every interaction with a Space Marine reminds him of what he might have been. Some chapters recognize this cruelty and offer failed aspirants the option to leave, to return to civilian life with the skills and training they acquired. Others insist on continued service, binding the failed aspirant to his oath until death releases him. The worst fate for failed aspirants comes not from failure during the trials or the implantation process, but from failure after achieving apparent success. Some aspirants complete every implant, undergo years of training as Scout Marines, prove themselves in combat as neophytes, and only then discover that their gene seed carries a fatal flaw. These warriors have tasted what it means to be Astartes. They have fought alongside their brothers, experienced the rush of superhuman capability, internalized the chapter's culture and teachings, then their biology betrays them. Gene seed rejection can occur years after implantation. An organ that appeared to integrate successfully suddenly begins failing. The body's immune system finally recognizes the foreign tissue and mounts a catastrophic response. The affected warrior's enhanced capabilities begin degrading, his strength diminishes, his stamina fails, his secondary heart struggles. He experiences constant pain as his body attempts to destroy the very implants that make him superhuman. The apothecaries can sometimes slow the process, can buy months or years with chemical treatments and surgical interventions, but they cannot stop it. The warrior's body has decided the transformation was a mistake and will not cease its attempt to undo the changes. These warriors face impossible choices. Some request immediate servitor conversion, preferring lobotomy to the slow degradation of watching themselves become less than they were. Others continue serving as long as possible, accepting ever-degrading assignments as their capabilities diminish, trying to find an honorable death before they become liabilities. Some chapters grant these warriors mercy, allowing them to die in final glorious combat rather than suffer complete failure. Other chapters insist they continue serving in whatever capacity remains possible, converting them to chapter serfs when they can no longer function as warriors, binding them to centuries of service watching their former brothers achieve the glory they once shared. The Carcharodons chapter demonstrates the cruelest approach to failed aspirants. Their serfs are treated as slaves, property of the chapter with no rights or considerations beyond their utility. Failed aspirants serve in the worst conditions, performing the most dangerous tasks with the understanding that their lives hold no value. The Carcharodons view sentiment toward failures as weakness. An aspirant who could not complete the transformation deserves no sympathy, no compassion, only exploitation until his usefulness expires. These serfs live in constant terror, knowing that any perceived inadequacy might result in immediate execution or conversion to servitors without the mercy of complete lobotomy. The Iron Warriors, even before their fall to chaos, regarded failed aspirants as expendable resources. They deployed serfs as frontline troops in meat grinder assaults, using them to absorb enemy fire and identify defensive positions before committing actual assaults. Survival was not expected. The failed aspirants had proven themselves inferior by failing the transformation. Their death served the Legion's purposes more effectively than their lives ever could. This approach continued after the Legion's corruption by chaos, with warpsmiths gleefully converting failed aspirants into components for demon engines, fusing human flesh with machine and warp-spawned entities to create weapons that screamed with the voices of those who had sought to become Space Marines. Some chapters have discovered that failed aspirants, particularly those who received several implants before rejection, can serve unusual purposes. The Crimson Fists employ failed aspirants as the Auric Auxilia, a military force that guards the phalanx and performs duties requiring superhuman capability but not full Astartes deployment. These warriors receive the best equipment available to baseline humans and training that exceeds most Imperial Guard regiments. They serve with distinction despite their failure to complete the transformation. After the fall of Cadia, the Auric Auxilia absorbed thousands of Imperial Guard veterans fleeing the planet's destruction, creating a military force thousands strong that serves the chapter's strategic needs while allowing full Astartes to focus on missions only they can accomplish. The Salamanders treat their failed aspirants with unusual compassion. Each battle brother maintains a personal brander priest, a serf responsible for ritually scarring the warrior during sacred ceremonies. These serfs hold honoured positions within the chapter, their service recognised as essential to maintaining the chapter's connection to Promethean cult teachings. The Salamanders develop genuine friendships with their serfs, treating them as brothers in purpose if not in biology. When a serf grows old or incapacitated, the Salamanders sometimes offer them servitor conversion not as punishment, but as a means to continue serving when their mortal bodies can no longer sustain them. These servitors retain more personality and awareness than standard conversions, existing in a twilight state between human consciousness and mechanical function. The fate of failed aspirants reflects the Imperium's fundamental approach to human resources. Individuals matter only insofar as they serve the Emperor's purposes. An aspirant who cannot become a Space Marine has not earned the right to freedom or self-determination. His body, his skills, his remaining lifespan all belong to the chapter he swore to serve. The specific form that service takes depends on the chapter's culture and needs, ranging from honoured positions that grant genuine purpose to horrific exploitation that reduces humans to components in machines. But the underlying principle remains constant across all chapters. The oath sworn transcends everything, only in death does duty end. And the chapters ensure that death comes only after every possible use has been extracted from the resource that failed to achieve its intended purpose. Across the Imperium, fortress monasteries hold thousands of these failures, aspirant servitors performing mindless labour with just enough awareness remaining to remember they once dreamed of glory. Chapter serfs watching their successful peers deploy to war while they clean equipment and maintain facilities. Wolfen prowling Fenris's wilderness, hunting aspirants while trapped in bodies and minds that remember being human. Failed blood angels locked in the Tower of the Lost, screaming for blood they will never taste, reliving Sanguinius's death eternally. These are the hidden costs of creating the Adeptus Astartes. These are the foundations upon which the Imperium's greatest warriors stand. The galaxy celebrates Space Marines as heroes, as the Emperor's chosen warriors, as humanity's finest defenders. Few understand that for every battle brother who achieves that glorious status, dozens of aspirants died in the attempt or survived as something less than human. The chapters do not advertise these failures. They do not speak of the boys who crossed deserts or fought their way through death worlds only to be reduced to servitors when their biology proved incompatible. They do not acknowledge the warriors who served with distinction for decades before their gene seed rejected and condemned them to watching their former brothers from the position of chapter serfs. The failures exist in shadows, their suffering unrecorded, their sacrifices unremembered. But they remain. In every fortress monastery across the Imperium, failed aspirants serve in whatever capacity their broken bodies and minds allow. They maintain weapons they will never carry. They clean armor they will never wear. They watch glory they will never achieve. And they remember. Those who retain enough consciousness to remember anything, what they might have been. The oath they swore promised service unto death. The chapters ensure they fulfill that promise, extracting every possible use from resources that proved insufficient for their intended purpose. This is the fate of failed space marines. This is the price of dreaming to stand among the Emperor's angels. This is the grimdark reality beneath the Imperium's propaganda of glorious warriors defending humanity. Some achieve transcendence through the transformation. Most die in the attempt, and those who fail but survive face fates that make death seem merciful.